Hi, I'm Harry and I live in London. I'm a 23-year-old graduate in modern foreign languages from the University of Warwick. And that degree basically means that over the course of 4 years, I studied to become fluent in Italian, French, and German. That degree has led me to live and work in not only the UK, but also in Italy, France, and Germany. And in all four of those countries, I've worked as a teacher, gaining experience in teaching English as a foreign language. The class sizes and ages in all four of those countries have varied between 1 student to 30 students, from the ages of 3 years old to 80 something years old. The class which I'm going to go through in this video is based on an adult advanced learner, but I will add that generally speaking, the formality of my classes is dictated by the students. I know that some learners prefer a much more informal conversation, while others prefer a more sort of regimented set out of rules, much more like a school environment. This example is sort of inspired by a student who I taught when I was in Italy, and is as best as I can a hybridization of the two. The topic which I plan on going through is a particular grammar rule, namely the use of future in the past. And yes, well, I'll get underway now. So I'd begin the session with some kind of starter activity to ensure comprehension and to begin to build up confidence with the student. My personal preference is to go through 1 or 2 articles on a current affairs topic and request that the learner read through them, and then we will have a conversation about them afterwards. The reason why a current affairs article is preferred is because it encourages, there's a lot of opportunity there for a learner to give their own opinion, which, especially among adult learners, makes them a lot more forthcoming in their speech, because they are encouraged by providing their own opinions. The discussion afterwards would be used to assess comprehension of the actual articles themselves, make sure that the learner has understood the majority of, well, check how much they've understood of it. Also, so that they can practice any new vocabulary or grammar points that they may have picked up through reading that article. It also stands as a good reference point for later on in the session, as I'll get onto shortly. After that starter activity, we would then go on to the main topic of the session. In this case, that particular grammar point, the use of future in the past. So I would begin by simply going through how that grammar rule exists and the context in which it's used in English. I could facilitate this by providing some examples myself, and also making those examples relevant to either content that we've already covered in that session, or just content which is already common knowledge between us, so that the understanding of the point isn't further complicated by not understanding the topic. After this point, I would begin to check on the learner's understanding. Initially, I'd probably do this through a sort of identification process. So in an ideal world, the articles that we go through at the beginning of the class would contain examples of the grammar rule. But this isn't always the case, as we probably know. So if there are some examples in those articles, I would request that the learner could highlight them so that I can check that they can recognize when it's being used. From there, I would begin to ask the learner if they can begin to formulate their own examples in the context of the article, of the subject of the article. So let's say, for example, the articles are on the coronavirus at the moment. The learner might create an example which is something like, I was going to go to China, but now I am not going to travel there. The idea being that we sort of progressively step up to uses of the grammar point in any context. So this being that sort of middle step where they are creating their own sentences, but the subject matter is confined to what we're already working on. Once they've shown mastery of this, we would then move on to them creating any example of the grammar rule in any situation to sort of branch out the usage. And we could then use these as trigger points for further conversations. And that's how we'd sort of end up the session, presuming this is a sort of 30-minute to 45-minute session. We would engage in a discussion ourselves so that we can practice comprehension from the learner's comprehension of what I'm saying, but also oral skills as they'll be speaking with me. If there's enough time and if I think it will be beneficial, another exercise which I quite like to do is something I call forced mistakes, based off of the fact that learners tend to retain the most information of what they teach to others. So if I give forewarning, and I would always warn before I do so, in some sentences when I'm speaking, I might deliberately make some grammar mistakes and request that the learner tells me what those mistakes are. By calling it out themselves, they're reinforcing their own understanding of what those grammar points are, and it means that they'll be able to better subconsciously remember them in the future. That, as a whole, would be how I would approach that lesson. Obviously, throughout the entire session, it's pretty manageable, depending on how well the student is understanding, to make that more or less difficult. So I could always provide more support in the creation of the examples initially, for example, if the student looked as if they were struggling. Whereas if they looked like they were grasping this fully, I would perhaps even skip the middle section where they made an example in the context of in this case, the coronavirus, and actually have them create more advanced examples straight away, so that we could move further in the discussion of the grammar points. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my video.